Zero trust, zero to hero. All right, let's dig into this a little bit. What is zero trust? Well, it really depends on who you talk to. People have different perspectives of what zero trust means to them. And we know where we're coming from, right? Under the old model, we have all computers and servers and devices all within the same network, and they're all trusted to some degree, right? They connect and they have access to services. But that model doesn't work. If we look at cloud services, COVID-19, the transition, mobile devices, the inside good and outside bad just doesn't work anymore. And so what's happening though is manufacturers are using these zero trust terms and using it to sell product. And in fact, maybe their product doesn't do anything more than it's ever done before, but they've put this label of zero trust on it. Now you get 10% more. Well, it's a little problematic, right? It gets people thinking that they're getting something that they may have had all along. And zero trust isn't about a single product, right? It's about a set of capabilities driving towards a framework, right? It's guidelines and principles that drive zero trust. And so there's still a lot of confusion out there. We've got that traditional defense, we've got the castle, the alligator, we've got this whole thing with next generation capabilities coming into play, adding a layer of security. And at the end of the day, people are just confused, really not certain of what zero trust is. And so it's not a single product. But if you go look at vendors, they talk about some of their principles around zero trust. And it seems to really tie back into where their strengths are. So vendor A, for example, examine all default controls, preventative techniques that touch on identity, data, and application access, real-time monitoring and controls to identify malicious activity, alignment of broader security strategy. Then we get into vendor B, zero trust principles, verify explicitly, use least privileged access, assume breach. And then vendor C, how to achieve zero trust architecture, network segmentation, next generation firewall, virtualized next generation firewall, user identity, application identity. Interesting. And you think that you're getting this map that's going to get you to zero trust. And in fact, you may only get pieces of what zero trust is promising. And so all of these have elements that are missing. No one vendor today in the marketplace can provide all the capabilities that zero trust requires. And so if we really look at what zero trust means, it's ultimately never trust and always verify. And if you look at some of the terminology, it's zero trust architecture, zero trust network architecture, perimeterless security. Try to say that 10 times. It's almost impossible. At least it is for me. But you can see these are other names that highlight what zero trust security model is. And if you look at some of the elements down here, some of the principles, single strong source of user identity, user authentication, machine authentication, additional context such as policy, compliance, and device health, authorization policies to access an application, and access control policies within an application. But let's really look and zoom in a little bit more, and we'll look at NIST 800-207. Zero trust is not a single architecture nor a product, but a set of guiding principles for workflow, system design, and operations that can be used to improve security posture of any classification or sensitivity level. And so when we look at the guidelines here, we see all data sources and computing services are considered resources. All right. All communication is secured regardless of network location. Okay. Access to individual enterprise resources is granted on a per session basis. Now that changes a lot. Access to resources is determined by dynamic policy, including observable state of client identity, application service, and requesting asset, and may include other behavioral and environmental attributes. The enterprise monitors and measures the integrity and security posture of all owned and associated assets, and all resources or all resource authentication and authorization are dynamically and strictly enforced before access is allowed. And the enterprise collects as much information as possible. The goal here is obviously to continually improve our security posture. And so that's what NIST outlines. And there's Forrester, there's Gartner, and you can probably Google it, anybody's opinion on what zero trust is. But these are the 7 guidelines or principles that you're going to follow to achieve zero trust. Zero trust acceleration adoption, COVID-19. So what do you mean? Well, look, do a quick Google. Zero trust and COVID. Securing the post-COVID-19 workforce. Is zero trust. ... Then you got data security and COVID-19. Why a zero trust environment is critical. You got zero trust in the era of COVID-19. 5 minutes with Jason Sirocco, if I said that correctly. The importance of zero trust. Then 60% of organizations have accelerated zero trust. And finally, you see at the bottom there, COVID-19 pushed most firms to adopt zero trust. Wow. But in fact, it's true. If you read this article from Chase, a VP principal analyst from Forrester, post-pandemic world demands that organizations shift to zero trust landscape more so than ever before. Zero trust has had over a 200% growth in the past year. 200%. Now that makes sense, right? But it's a very specific use case that most people are driving towards. But the hybrid workforce is here to stay. Organizations have proven out that you don't need to be in the office to be successful. It's the largest proof of concept ever in IT, in my opinion. And it was successful. And so the hybrid workforce is going to be here. Organizations are using it as an advantage. Come work for us. You can live in the mountains or live by the lake. You don't need to come into the office. And then there's the environmental benefits that obviously organizations are going to promote as well. So it's here to stay. Zero trust is certainly foundational to helping us with our overall security posture. But let's reset a little bit with capability-driven discussion. And so, folks that know me and have listened to me before, I really talk about going back and understanding the capabilities to drive an outcome. Too many times we're product-driven or maybe even a capability-driven right out of the gate without truly understanding the use case and the required security elements that I need. And so taking a step back allows us to do that, right? Is to go back and say, what is required in order for me to be comfortable that I have a security capability in place? And we're going to do that. We're going to walk through that here today. But there's a couple different use cases, right? You got work from home and SaaS-based connectivity, VPN-based connectivity, and straight to internet. And so those may all require similar capabilities, but also differing capabilities. And same thing with campus user to email service. The goal here, though, is to understand the capabilities that we require in order to feel comfortable with our overall security posture. And then what we want to do is wrap this up and ensure that we don't lose sight of the bigger picture with threat intelligence, threat hunting and incident response, and orchestration and automation, because fragmentation's the enemy of security, right? Complexity is the enemy of security. And so if we break these up into silos and look at them from like a point product perspective, we could get ourselves in trouble. So always go back to understanding the capabilities required to drive out zero trust outcomes. So align to that framework. And so let's think about zero trust as a whole, and the best way to think about how much security or increased effectiveness that we're going to get is to think about red teams or the adversary themselves. So has zero trust really been tested? Well, I don't know that it has. And so when you look at, and outside of a lab, right? But I don't know that it has. And so if you look at this Wired article, this is just recently released, and again, talks about zero trust and really depends on who you talk to. And it goes into, the moat and the castle networking model. It no longer works, right? There is a shift. And so we've already talked about that. But it states here, they say that zero trust is not a security panacea, right? Security professionals who are paid to hack organizations and discover their digital weaknesses, known as red teams, as an example, have really not had to walk around a fully deployed zero trust environment. And so they've been able to get in using traditional methods because there's still this environment that exists that's not going to go away overnight. So even as you start adopting zero trust, there's going to be a length of time before you're fully zero trust. And then the adversary may be forced to overcome those barriers. But if they don't have to overcome them today, why would they even bother? Right? It's just as simple as if your system is not patched, they're not going to look for some advanced technique to get into the system. They're going to use an exploit that can take advantage of that vulnerability. And so red teamers haven't really fully tested, at least the article claims, hasn't really tested zero trust, and nor have they been forced to do so. And so the adversary continues to be successful. And then we've got another side of this whole equation. And this is the missing piece, in my opinion, is that supply chain is not being considered, or at least it doesn't seem to me to be considered in that zero trust model. So I can authenticate and authorize based on all kinds of conditions, right? Before I let somebody, and that's user and device as an example, connect to some type of resource. But what about supply chain? Isn't that important? And so if we look at a couple of them, obviously everyone's fully aware of SolarWinds, and I'm not here to beat up anything, right? And then the one with Kaseya. The point here is that what happens if you've got technologies in place that have been the supply chain has been compromised, whether that's in the manufacturing stage, whether that's the supporting infrastructure that gets the updates, whether it's a certificate to allow me to do something. It doesn't matter. There's some risk here. And these are already trusted within the environment, right? They're maybe even providing services that support the overall infrastructure, like in these cases here. And now they're in the environment. And so this is why I'm a big believer that zero trust is certainly a significant advantage for the defender, but it's not the only element, right? I still don't trust a payload coming out of an asset. I need to inspect that. And how do I do that? Well, that might be IPS. So that capability is still required. Can that IPS feed into my zero trust framework and provide additional intelligence so I can make a decision, meaning that this asset had a level of trust to access an application, but based on this new information, I no longer allow access. So the impact of this in supply chain specifically is huge. And so you can see here the Securities and Exchange Commission is investigating into SolarWinds Russia hacking operation, yada, yada, yada. But they're reaching out and they're trying to talk to executives to get more information around it. And they believe that unearthing and expanding the probe may expose them to some level of liability. Again, this is still unfolding, but I think everyone agrees here. You want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence in regards to security as a whole, and you've got at least the basics, and I would say that's not even enough, security elements in place, and obviously following any guidelines that are mandated by us. Okay, so let's look back and take a step back, and I'm going to walk through this. But we want to look at the asset and I put in, anonymous here as a potential adversary that compromises the box. I like the picture. So, and I like the hoodie. So anybody that's against the hoodie, with security professionals, hackers, red teamers, whatever you want to call them, I don't care. I like the hoodie. I'd wear it all day. And if that's the way you want to look at me with the hoodie, then that's fine. But let's talk about this a little bit. Let's walk through the capabilities. Okay, patching. And so if you look at the bottom here, I got prevent in blue, and then detect and respond. And so patching, obviously system hygiene is important. And if I can mitigate that by patching everything 100% of the time, then there's very little chance that a vulnerability that's known is going to be exploited. The reality is I'm not going to be able to do that, but the goal is there. Then you got things like exploit prevention, system process protection. So looking at the processes and protecting them, if there's some type of injection that might take place, we want to prevent that, right? You got, traditional AV, and then you've got advanced malware protection, behavioral protection, or malicious activity protection. So this is things like, you're trying to encrypt my drive or my files. That's something that's not normal. And just that activity itself, if I'm not able to determine you're bad, I'm going to block it. You got application blocking, network blocking, USB blocking. I think those are self-explanatory. You might even have IPS on the endpoint. Now, this might be upstream or on the endpoint. It could be in the cloud. You got firewall, the same thing. It could be on the endpoint. It could be driven out of the cloud or based on the network connection. Fileless malware, so malware that's running in memory, so it doesn't have any residency on disk. And then you've got, the buzz terms, AI and ML, but ultimately you've got good data, clean data, and you've got this algorithm that can, study and understand what good and bad looks like. And then based on an unknown file, make a determination whether or not it falls into each of those categories. So that's kind of the prevention capability, maybe on an endpoint. And then you've got some of that detect and response capability, right? You've got endpoint detection and response, forensic snapshots. You've got host isolation, the ability to, if compromised, based on maybe automated action or manual intervention, isolate that host no matter where it is. You've got cloud-based IOCs, so additional intelligence to further enhance your understanding of what might be happening on the asset. And then based on that, you could drive out some blocking mechanism. Command line capture, so understanding the full command line, PowerCat, ... right? Leveraging PowerShell. We want to know everything that was passed in the command line. Sandbox and file analysis. This is typically like more of a detect and response capability, because you can't sandbox and detonate a file, look at all the behaviors in time to make a decision. You've got risk-based vulnerability assessment and software that might be on here. So if we can identify that, then we can patch it, mitigate. You've got IP fix flow correlation. So this is tracking every single network-based connectivity from every single process, regardless if it's good, bad, or whatever. Everything is tracked. As you move along, you start getting into, in this case, we're on the campus. We're inside the network. So think of hybrid workforce. One might be off-premise, and another user may have, or that same user may have come into the office. So we're in the office, plugged into the wired side, and so you want authentication, authorization, you got endpoint posture, you got dynamic control, and then you moved into detect and response. You probably want to track denied authentications, you want device insight, you want allowed authentications, but if you're looking for an incident or something suspect, you might be looking for denied authentications. DNS security, web proxy, DLP, TLS decrypt, advanced malware protection. So you might say, well, didn't you call that out on the endpoint? Yes, I did. But advanced malware protection on the network or farthest away from the asset I'm protecting gives me more time on the endpoint. And I'd rather block further away from the asset I'm protecting than the asset itself, although I still need it. Then you get DNS forensics, full URI capture, sandbox file analysis. Again, I can do that here on the network. Then I start moving, I get into DDoS, and then I get into DDoS analysis. I get multi-factor authentication, endpoint posture, geo control. So you might say, well, wait a minute, what was the difference between here and here? This is a network control, right? So I'm authorizing and authenticating here. And then I'm accessing an application. And so now I'm doing that when I connect to the application. So something may have changed when I connected to the network versus when I access the application. Then you get device insight, denied authentications as well. Then you get into some of that, firewalling next gen capability, right? L7 firewall control, TLS decrypt, IPS, advanced malware inspection. Might get into correlation and behavioral based policy. So if X, Y, and Z happens, then I might want to take an action. So for example, you have a high value target inside the organization. If, for example, they see an indication of compromise, an IPS alert, and they're running this operating system coming from this subnet and connected to this geo. Based on all of those conditions, I might want to actually take some type of network-based control or some remediation action. Host profiling, understanding the host and the application's operating systems on it. That helps drive out some things like impact analysis, so I can focus on things that matter to me. Sandbox file analysis. You got vulnerability insight, event packet capture, event workflow, so the ability to drill down. As we go through, we look at behavioral-based flow analytics. And that's really an afterthought, right? So that's taking NetFlow or IPFix or JFlow, any of the flows, taking it in, NSG logs, VPC logs if you're connected to the cloud. But the goal here is take that information in, run some analytics against that, and determine whether or not there might be something that bypassed every one of these controls, but they're doing SMB 445 probes as an example. And that asset never normally did that. Then you got WAF, Web Application Firewall, and then the analysis that support that. Reputation filtering around email, because that's the service we're actually connecting to. You've got spam, business email compromise, advanced malware protection, right? Because we can do that here at email. Gray mail, phishing, URL protection, sandboxing. And sandboxing actually can become a defensive capability or prevention capability. Because I can actually hold mail for a longer period of time where I can't do that with HTTP, as an example. And then you want supporting data as well for detect and response, so message tracking, URL, or file analysis. And then the application itself, you got application segmentation, you've got blocking communications to IOCs, you've got application visibility, and then forensics. As a summary, you might add or remove capabilities as time goes on. That service might also have endpoint prevention, detection, and response capabilities. But that's what I might need in order to feel confident that I've got the right security elements in play. You can see there's no product here, but you can also see this could get complex very, very quickly. A lot of different tools, a lot of different interfaces potentially. How do I tie this all together? That's why you've got to think of all these elements. And so when you zoom in, and if you look at the zero trust principles, we really get three areas. We've got the network. When we're connecting, we have an opportunity to authenticate, authorize, look at the posture, do dynamic-based control. On the application side, so session-based control, we have the ability to do MFA, endpoint posture, geo control. Obviously, you're inside in this case, so maybe less relevant. And then on the application or workload side, we can actually do ensure that understanding the applications, we only allow access based on a host-based control that's driven based on intelligence to control access to those services. And then you want zero, the whole thing around threat intelligence, and then threat hunting and incident response. You've got to consider these in all of this. And then orchestration and automation, because complexity is the enemy of security. So we've got kind of the three core elements that drive out zero trust. But how many products? What about cloud? What about remote users? What about DC services? So data center services, right? Again, maybe a different workflow, but the point here is this is one workflow, right? Use case, campus user to email services on premise. And there's more, right? As you start peeling this back, think about the remote worker. Think about the person accessing your SaaS-based applications, your remote worker that's VPNing in, your IoT devices that are inside your buildings or facilities, right? It goes on and on. Your OT environment. And so you can see how complex all of these different pieces coming together could be. Now, the zero trust elements are wonderful, right? So it's going to help with contextual awareness, posture assessed, user machine auth, and authorization. So authentication and authorization, dynamic control. You get software-defined access or microsegmentation. You've got primary authentication would be done with multi-factor authentication when you're accessing the application. Again, endpoint posture and health, and location could be assessed. And then application mapping, process mapping, host-based microsegmentation in the data center or cloud or container. And so those are definitely pillars of zero trust. Now think about this though for a second. If we had SolarWinds, and I apologize to SolarWinds, nobody wants to pick on anybody. We're all at risk. It doesn't matter how good we are. We're all at risk. But this is a real example. And let's say SolarWinds happens and happens to be installed on that particular machine. The user clicks a high-risk web link. Right? Maybe a payload is crafted and is sent from that user. We're still compromised with zero trust. We may have authenticated to the network. We may have been authenticated and authorized on the application, and there might be levels of segmentation within the data center. Now, there's still things that we benefit from zero trust, but this is my point. Zero trust to me means I don't trust that packet. I don't trust the link the user's going to. Right? I never trust that. So even though I've given a layer of trust here, I don't trust it forever, that's for sure. And I need these other compensating controls in my environment to help drive that zero trust outcome. And so things like system hygiene, right, or risk-based vulnerability understanding, that's going to be helpful. Endpoint security is going to help minimize my risk. DNS security, web proxy, TLS decrypt, intrusion prevention, security intelligence, reputation insight, behavioral analytics, both endpoint, server, and network, and then process protection. And so this is going to help me maintain a level of zero trust, right? It's going to make sure that when these things detect and determine threats in the organization, again, that whole reassessment and maybe that trusted access or semi-trusted access, because you never trust anything 100%, is now removed. But zero trust definitely helped reduce the blast radius, right? So where can I go? Can I move laterally? Maybe not, right? Software-defined access is not allowing me to move laterally. What about on the data center side? Can I start probing CNC? Well, maybe not, right? There's a control in place there that minimizes the ability to do that, right? Or the application segmentation itself didn't allow for that process to make that network-bound connection outbound anyway. So it certainly is beneficial, and you can see the value of it. But again, to my point, you need the other controls, right? Or the other capabilities. So when it comes to Cisco, where do we fit in all of this? So Cisco's got 3 critical areas, and then there's the complementary side. And so let's zoom in a little bit. So the first one is, and we call these the 3 W's. So the first one's workforce. So this is to establish trust of users and devices to determine their application access privileges. Think of this as that per session access control. Workload. Minimizing the attack surface while enforcing least privileged access to and from our workloads. So think of this as application segmentation or host-based controls, microsegmentation in the data center, containers, virtualization, bare metal, cloud. All of those areas are kind of covered under workload. And then workplace, on networks you control and establish trust based on access control for users' devices and including IoT devices. So workplace, think of the campus. So when you plug in a camera or you plug in a printer, right, you go through a scrutiny of things to get a level of comfort before you allow access. That includes a user with a traditional machine connecting to the network. And that could be wired, wireless, or VPN. And so the goal here is to establish trust by verifying, right? So multi-factors of user identity, device context and identity, device posture and health, location, relevant attributes and context that may help support that. Then we got enforcement with least privilege to networks, applications, resources, users, and things. Think of that first thing, right? In NIST, where it says all data and compute and is all now considered resources. So we want to make sure that we're using least privileged here. And then continuous trust verification. So making sure that the trust level that was established is maintained. Traffic is not threat traffic, behavior for any risk and anomalous or malicious actions. If compromised, then the trust is broken. So this is where those compensating capabilities come in, right? That help drive that zero trust outcome. And this is, again, the summary of the 3 W's. So workforce, again, it's all about establishing trust level for users and their devices, accessing applications. Workload, again, in summary, it's restrict access to workloads based on risk. If you're not sure what is a workload is a service, right? Think of a server that does Active Directory, right? That's a workload. But again, based on contextual policy and verified business need. And then finally, software-defined access, or that workplace element where we're establishing least privileged access control and validating the health and of the device before we allow it onto the network. Now, we've got the 3 W's, right? 3 core tenets of zero trust. But let's look at the complementary capabilities to extend that trust for any app, any workload, and any network. And so when we look at it, we'll start going left to right, and then we'll show overlapping capabilities. But on the workforce side, we've got obviously secure cloud delivered things like DNS, proxy, IPS, firewall, data loss prevention, cloud access security broker. You've got TLS decrypt. And you can see that overlaps, in fact, to workload and workplace. Then you have endpoint with IPFix and VPN connectivity. And so VPN is pretty standard capability, but IPFix, as I mentioned earlier, provide you insight into every process or application making a network-bound connection, whether it's good or bad. You've got secure email. You've got the remote browser isolation. Now, this one's interesting because what it does essentially is it enables the browser to be in the cloud, and high-valued targets in your organization could leverage this capability to ensure that if there was an exploit targeting a browser, it's not going to actually be realized because this is actually in the cloud. It's not actually on the user's machine itself. You've got endpoint forensics. And so that extends some trust capabilities. Also, risk-based vulnerability asset inventory are also complementary here as well, but also fall under that detect and response capability. And so secure malware analytics and sandboxing, you can see how that stretches across. And then you got secure endpoint, EDR, endpoint detection response, advanced malware protection. Now, in blue here, we've got complementary to security. So what that means is that it might not be a dedicated security or control capability, but it might provide insight. So application insight and performance, for example, might indicate that there is a process running hot on an asset that may have been compromised, for example. And it might have been the application teams that determined that there was some performance impact. There might be an indicator there and bring in security, and security obviously could look at it and say, oh yeah, you know what, this is bad. You've got secure network, next-gen firewall, next-gen IPS, advanced malware, TLS. You've got secure web application firewall, secure network analytics. And then at the very bottom there, you see advanced malware protection. Again, there's some overlapping between the W's, right? Workload and workplace. And then finally, we're at workplace where we got layer 2 security. Think of this as, port security, DHCP rogue servers not being able to connect to the port and start offering IP addresses. Software-defined access would fall under here too, but that's covered under workplace as a core tenet of zero trust. Then you get into layer 3, layer 4 microsegmentation. You got reverse proxy. You've got TLS, decrypt and traditional proxy. You got policy orchestration as well. And so those help extend. And then there's a couple blue items there, right? You've got software-defined WAN, network controller, and dashboard that certainly help complement the security teams with additional insight and knowledge. When we get into detect and response, we got OT assets and vulnerabilities, so understanding the operational environment, secure cloud analytics, you've got secure DDoS, bot, and dedicated SSL decrypt, and again, a complementary capability to security is network intel and monitor. And then we've got that, bringing it all together. And so you can build data lakes, and data lakes is something lots of folks are investing in. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. But what I am going to say here, though, is that all these capabilities exist. And imagine if I turn them into what I like to call our data ponds and access them, or build the river system to access them as I need it at the time I need it. And so extended detection response, orchestration, and automation provides that capabilities using APIs to drive insight from all of these as needed, right? So if there's an incident that kicks off and I'm looking at, for example, an IP and a SHA-256, those are the observations I have. I input it into the tool, and the tool should be able to go out to the technologies and capabilities that exist, Cisco or third party, and pull that data back and give me a visual, a relations graph in regards to what that might look like in my organization, and also allow me to drive outcomes right from that platform without having to log into multiple different disparate, potentially based systems. Supply chain also, as I mentioned, becomes critically important. And I didn't even know this existed, but there's a Gartner supply chain. There's the top 25 for 2021. Cisco has been on top 2 years in a row. As you can see here, there's not very many security companies on this list. In fact, I'm struggling to see any. Now, you might say, well, Intel, yeah, okay, Intel might, Dell or HP might have security stuff, right? But Schneider, I'm sure, has security elements as well. But you can see Cisco tops that list. Number 2 and 3 is Colgate and Johnson & Johnson when it comes to supply chain. And so this isn't something that was built overnight. This has been a long journey to get here. And so we've developed what we call as trustworthy, transparent, and accountable. It's a part of our trust center. And if as a consumer of the technology, you can come here and learn anything you want about maybe a cloud technology that you want to deploy, and you want to know where the data is, what types of data, who has access to the environment, etc. That's all outlined here. You can pull down, say, as an example, Umbrella, and you're going to be able to see where the data resides, what it's doing, all the details that you would want to understand about your data. And so, this has been in place for a very, very long time. The other piece is secure development lifecycle. This isn't something, again, that has been built overnight. This has been a very long standard that Cisco's been building towards, and it's to ensure that security is entrenched in everything we do, from development to the inception to delivering it to the consumer, to upgrading the products as you start to operationalize it. Security is top of mind. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. Zero Trust workshops. What? Yeah. So we've got 2 available from Cisco, strategy and planning. This is where you're going to learn how to accelerate your zero trust journey, perform gap analysis, and network with peers to share strategies and techniques. The other one's implement and execute. This is where we're going to implement zero trust strategy that delivers results, explore use cases with hands-on experience. This is going to allow us to discover some best practices and really get to see the technology in use. And you're going to see how easy it is to realize it. The other thing that I've added to this was on implement and execute, I've actually created a Zero to Hero YouTube series on the how-to element of zero trust. So it focuses on the doing, and it walks you through step by step. There's multiple different videos that show you all different elements and use cases throughout that journey. Now, again, I'm just going to come back and NIST 800-207, zero trust, not a single architecture, or in that case, a product, right? It's a guiding set of principles. And so you've got the 3 W's: workforce, workplace, workload. And so you can see where they're certainly core to zero trust and how they help support those 7 initiatives to drive out that zero trust outcome, but also how important those complementary technologies are. You cannot successfully, in my opinion, deliver zero trust without those other capabilities providing deeper insight into what's happening after you establish a level of trust. Again, we never 100% trust anything at any point in time. That payload or packet may be suspect, and we want to make sure that we have the ability to change our minds if that is true. All right, so this is it. Jeopardy, BSides Edmonton. We've got our list here: zero trust, endpoint, red team, flow, perimeter, incident, and then we've got help desk. Now, I know everybody's pretty confident here, and so we're going to take, Alex, if you don't mind, we're going to take zero trust for 1,000. Well, look at that, daily double, I might say. It's double something. And so we've got a lot of confidence. So BSides Edmonton, I know you're willing to wager 10,000 here. Let's do it. Alex, it is not a single architecture or product, but a set of guiding principles for workflow, system design, operations that can be used to improve security posture of any classification or sensitivity level. Now everybody's playing that Jeopardy theme in the back of their mind right now. All right, so what is it? BSides Edmonton, what is NIST 800-207? That's correct. Remember, zero trust is not a single product. It's not an architecture, right? It's a set of guiding principles. Zero trust, never trust, always verify.